The topic of today's video is how the conscious and the subconscious mind influences our climbing performance and how to use it to your advantage. It may sound silly at first, but after I paid more attention to my mind and the thoughts that I have while I actively climb, I was able to get more consistent with climbing V6s and even climb some V7s, which is my current limit. It's also helped me climb 511s consistently, and I'm starting to break into the 512s as well. Inspiration for this video comes from a wise friend who once told me, when you're climbing at your limit, you shouldn't think with your conscious mind. The rationale is that when you're climbing something that's very hard, it can often feel like you're going to fall off at any moment, especially when you're at the crux section that you've fallen countless times before. We tend to think of our conscious mind as something that's very objective and very intelligent, but it often wanders a lot when we're pushed at our limits, and sometimes it can bring up a lot of negative thoughts in your head when you're climbing, like, the reach is too far. Is my foot going to slip? I think my foot's going to slip. I'm not strong enough today. Even when I make it past the crux, I probably can't even do the second section. This is scary. Did I leave my stove on? Imagine that all familiar scenario where you make a small mistake during a sequence and all of a sudden the voice in your head exponentially gets louder, telling you that you can't do the send because you made that small mistake. These doubtful thoughts distract you from what's really important, which is linking the moves together to make it up the climb. You fall. Ultimately, letting the conscious mind take control allows it to make meaningless chatter in your head that misleads you into thinking that you can't do something. But in reality, there may have been a chance that if you had better control of your mentality and thoughts, you would have been able to make it. This brings up the concept of the whole video. The concept that you should commit to memory is, when you're off the wall, in other words, not climbing, you should use your conscious mind to think things through. But when you're on the wall or actively climbing, you should rely only on your subconscious mind to guide you. It needs to be emphasized here that conscious thinking should be minimized as much as possible when you are climbing. The conscious mind is very useful for heavy thinking before the climb. For instance, thinking through the sequence you're about to make, or thinking about any safety risks, such as when you're in a rocky area or when you have a bad landing. But as we saw earlier, it could be a hindrance when you're actually on the wall and climbing. So when you're actually climbing, your goal is to switch off the conscious mind, allowing for mostly subconscious thoughts and muscle memory to dictate your climb. In other words, your mind should be a blank slate when climbing. So this is how I'm going to split up the rest of the video. I'll talk about off-the-wall tactics, how to maximize the usage of your conscious mind when you're off the wall, and on-the-wall tactics, how to tune out the conscious mind during the active phase of climbing and rely more on the subconscious mind. When you're off the wall, this is when your conscious mind is very useful. It becomes a space for you to attend to any pressing thoughts that you may have about a climb. The idea is to deal with your conscious thoughts so well that you're able to pack them away. That way, they're dealt with and you're not forced to think about them when you're on the wall. It's kind of like mental baggage, and you don't want this mental baggage when you're climbing. So here are some important things that I think of usually during a session that eliminates some of that mental baggage when I'm on the wall. The first question that I usually ask at the start of each session is, am I warm enough? It's a very simple question, but as a very injury-prone person, I find that when I'm at the crux section of some routes and I'm not warm, there's always a voice at the back of my head telling me that I can't pull hard on this because I'll pull a pulley or I'll hurt my hand or my back or something. So it's very important to ask if you're warm enough before you get on the wall. That way you don't have these self-limiting thoughts of asking yourself if you're warm enough and preventing you from pulling hard when you're on that climb. This is one example of how your conscious mind can generate these self-limiting thoughts that prevents you from performing well. And the only solution to that is using your conscious mind before you climb, before you get on the wall, and when you're just sitting and looking up at the problem, making sure that you rationalize with yourself that you are warm. By rationalizing this beforehand, you won't have these thoughts when you're actually climbing. At the start of each session, I always dedicate about 30 minutes to warming up. It gives you a lot more time to warm up the fingers and get them adjusted to your session. And also, I find that warming up your legs and your lower back and overall the whole body, you'll just have a much better session because climbing is not all fingers and back. It's your body tension and it's your core, it's everything when you're climbing at a very high level. The second thing that your conscious mind is useful for is rationalizing your fears before starting a scary problem, such as right here where I'm attempting a pretty scary comp wall at my local gym. I find that a lot of the time when I'm looking up at a problem, it's a lot of conscious thinking to prepare myself to not be scared. So things that I usually think about is potential fall zones. Like here, there are some jugs that are jutting out of the wall that I can potentially fall and hurt myself on. And also some risky moves, how I would mitigate these risky moves such as the splits in the air that I'm about to do. So overall, you can use your conscious mind to rationalize and try to build that confidence for you to start the climb. Try to get as much fear out of your system as possible by consciously thinking when you're off the wall. That way you're not forced to think about it when you're on the wall. Lastly, the conscious mind is very useful for obviously going over the beta in your head. Some of the more creative ways that can really be helpful is to do it with your eyes closed. Or if you're really intense like Adam Ondra, you can just do it while you're rolling around on the ground, trying every single move. The mind is pretty powerful, and to use it consciously when you're not really physically exerting yourself off the wall, that's the best time to get all the details into your head so then you can subconsciously use it when you're on the wall. A huge beta tip that I can give is not to call the holds good or bad, because if you call a hold bad, then it kind of just gives you a negative connotation towards that hold, and you have to hold that hold anyways to get up, so don't get into that negative mindset and call it bad. Rather, what the Rock Warriors way recommends is to really rationalize what size that hold is. So for here, I'm kind of holding a rectangle hold, 5 inches wide, 2 inches in width, and about 1 centimeter or half a centimeter in depth. If you can do this for every single hold while you're going over the beta for a climb, it will really help you rationalize the problem more. By doing this, it just gives you better intuition on how to hold each hold, and it increases your chance of flashing the route. Yeah, use that tip, it's really good. Now we'll cover what to think about when you're on the wall, which is to tune out the conscious mind as much as possible and try to rely more on the subconscious mind, which is the raw intuition from our own climbing experience and whatever is happening in your head that keeps you on the wall. The ideal is not to even think about thinking, but this is easier said than done because once the climb gets really difficult, the conscious mind almost always reappears in our head telling us that we can't do it. So how do we tune this out? A really good excerpt of how to do this is in the Rock Warriors way.
When you're in the chaos of the risk zone, the conscious mind often will revolt. It is outside its realm, the comfort zone, and if engaged in the thinking process, the conscious mind will create thoughts of comfort. These thoughts are pure deception. When comfort thoughts arise, let the thoughts go and stay with your intention. You'll accomplish this not by arguing or reasoning with the conscious mind, which takes you even further off task, but rather by doing something with your body. Breathe consciously and continuously. Shifting your focus from the intruding thoughts to your breathing makes a bridge back to the body, to the flow of action and movement. Keep moving. Don't wait for perfection. Use the holds you grab. Climbing continuously makes it difficult for the conscious mind to keep up, to reassess the situation, or create fear. Continuous climbing creates momentum that overwhelms thoughts. The conscious mind gives up and disengages from trying to control the action.
Usually the thing that makes the conscious mind pop up in your head and tell you that you can't do it is your own doubt of not making up the climb. And a way for you to be more calm is through these 3 body-oriented methods that the author lists, which is continuous breathing, continuous climbing, and thirdly, soft eyes focus, which is not in this video but is covered in my first video. When I first started to implement all 3 of these into my climbing, everything just felt way more calm. And usually when you're more calm, your movement, it will just flow so much better. To show you how effective these things are, I'll show you footage of this comp climb that I did, and I'll break it down in terms of what is happening mentally in my head. This is hands down one of the coolest problems I've ever tried at my local gym. Kind of delicate start, and then it goes into some basic regular climbing that you would imagine, but near the top there's like a spicy slab comp style. So it's like a perfect mix of standard climbing and comp style scariness. The point of view here is me off the wall, so mainly here I'm using my conscious mind to really think about how I'm going to approach this problem. As mentioned earlier, I really assess if I'm warm enough to do this problem, that way I can unrelentlessly pull hard and really tough it out on my attempt. Next thing was gathering the beta. I really analyzed all the holds, all its sizes, and the different grip types that would be suitable for it. And even though I see my friends trying the beginning section with their chest outwards, the beta that I interpreted was completely different. I realized that analyzing the holds and creating my own beta also was a good idea because there's this one hold that is very chalked out, which means that a lot of people grab that hold, but honestly, I haven't seen anyone successfully go past this part of the problem using that method. I guess the big idea is by rationalizing the whole problem by yourself, you can honestly not fall into the trap that a lot of people fall into and just like really go through the problem very logically. The last thing for me to do before starting the climb was to suss out the climb and make sure that I'm not scared before I go up. There's a lot of scary parts in the climb that I've bailed from in the past because the perspective of looking down is just so scary. With that in mind, I just had to calm myself and reassure myself before I even started, such as this part where I'm directly above these drugs that are sticking out, and also during the split section where I'm just scared that I'm just gonna fall directly into a split section and then like rip my groin or something. So yeah, number one, assess if you're warm. Number two, go over the beta. And number three is to build up the confidence on scary climbs. With that said, it's time to execute. So when you start the problem, you gotta make sure to remind yourself to switch to a subconscious mindset and try to have a blank slate when you're climbing. But here's the plot twist. You might be asking, boss, if you want to have a blank mind, why did you tell me to think of the beta? Is that beta just useless now because I don't think about it? Well, not really. If you thought about your beta really well before starting the climb, you can kind of also not really think about it because that will also be part of your subconscious too while you're climbing. The thing about focusing on your beta too much when you're climbing is your climbing just becomes very rigid. You start to think about like, oh, I gotta put my left hand here, my right hand here, my left foot here. It makes your climbing too rigid and you can't really flow too well. So the best thing is just to keep a blank mind and to let your intuition just dictate your climbing. On this attempt, I remember trying to keep my mind super blank, but there were still some things that I kept in mind. For instance, on this delicate portion, on the footholds, I really needed to step on the parts farthest away from the wall. That way my upper body can lean in as much as possible to keep my balance. I make the lean left and then I grab the catch. Now it's like V3 or V4 standard climbing. This section was well within my bouldering limits, so my mind was still pretty blank actually, and it really allowed me to just feel things out and just enjoy the climb. This next transition does get a little spicy right when I put my right foot up. There's a very horizontal mantle which is quite strenuous, and whenever you do something strenuous, your conscious mind starts to go into your head a little bit, and I start to get these quitting thoughts. Also, I'm a little scared in this kind of compromised position. The fear does get a little worse at this section, and to keep my mind from freaking out at this point, the best thing to do is those body-oriented methods explained earlier, which is continuous breathing and continuous climbing. By breathing continuously and putting all of your thought into breathing, it will distract your mind into only focusing on breathing while you execute these moves that are a little scary, and this is actually how I made it through this far. Continuous climbing also distracts you, and then here I match and I complete the problem. Throughout the problem also, I did use soft eyes focus, which is like a calming mechanism as well, and I explained it a lot better in my first video. But yeah, those are some of the subconscious tips that really help. So when you're in like a very compromised, scary position, just remember to focus on breathing and climb continuously, and it should help. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks for sticking it through, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to like and comment. That really helps the video algorithm so more people can see this pop up on their YouTube. And yeah, stay tuned for the next video.
Oh, sick! Dude, it's scary as
Oh, shit. Nice. Okay. You finally got it.
Finally.
All right.
Thank you.
Dude, I got you.